Hey there, welcome back to my channel. I'm Spiderfish. Let this be your quiet little corner of the internet where the blocks can stack in Minecraft and you can let the noise of the world fade away. These aren't just campfire ghost stories, they're based on real accounts. Families, witnesses, and entire towns claimed to have lived through them. So, get comfortable and let's begin. Story 1. The Bell Witch. Our story begins in the early 1800s, in the quiet farmland of Robertson County, Tennessee. It was here that John Bell, a farmer, moved his family to a modest homestead along the Red River. Life was simple. They grew their crops, raised their children, and tried to carve out a peaceful existence in a young America that was still half wilderness. But the peace didn't last. It started small. Scratching sounds in the walls, strange thumps at night. At first, the family thought it might be animals, rats or raccoons slipping into the cabin. But no matter how carefully they searched, they found nothing. Then came the whispers, voices too faint to understand, drifting through the halls when no one else was speaking. The children reported seeing strange creatures at the edge of the woods, a dog with a rabbit's head, a bird of unnatural size. And at night, blankets would be tugged from their beds. Something unseen seemed to pluck at their hair. The Bells were terrified. They prayed, they inspected, they even tried ignoring it. But the disturbances only grew stronger. Eventually, the unseen presence found its voice. At first, it was just murmurs, like wind in the trees. But over time, the words became clear. A woman's voice, disembodied, echoing through the house. The entity introduced itself as Kate Batts, a neighbor of the Bells. Kate had long harbored a grudge against John Bell, believing he had cheated her in a land deal. And now, from beyond the grave, she claimed she was here to torment him. The family called it the Witch, the Bell Witch, and torment them she did. The spirit seemed to fixate on John Bell and his daughter, Betsy. John suffered mysterious illnesses, trembling, choking fits, sensations like invisible hands tightening around his throat. Betsy was slapped, pinched, her hair pulled by forces no one could see. Visitors to the Bell home reported being mocked, cursed, and even struck by the witch. And yet, the voice could also be eerily charming. It would sing hymns, quote scripture, even carry on conversations with neighbors. Some claimed it knew things it couldn't possibly know, secrets spoken in confidence, events happening miles away. The witch was cruel, but intelligent. Malicious, but impossible to ignore. The story spread through Tennessee, drawing curious onlookers. Among them was none other than General Andrew Jackson. Yes, the future president of the United States. Intrigued by the tales, Jackson traveled to the Bell farm with a group of men. They arrived with wagons and tents, ready to investigate. But according to the legend, as soon as they neared the property, their wagons stopped. The horses refused to move, the wheels stuck as though held by invisible hands. Jackson reportedly laughed and said, "By the eternal, boys, this is better than fighting the British." That night, they stayed at the Bell home. One of Jackson's men bragged that he could defeat any spirit, showing off a shiny pistol. Almost immediately, he began screaming, claiming he was being struck and pinched by invisible forces. The witch's voice rang out, mocking him. The next morning, Jackson and his men left in haste. He later said he'd rather face the entire British army than spend another night with the Bell Witch. The haunting escalated for years, but its focus never wavered. John Bell. His health declined steadily. He wasted away, racked by mysterious fits and seizures. In December of 1820, John Bell was found dead. By his bedside was a vial of strange liquid. When the family asked the witch what it was, her voice rang through the house. "It's the medicine I gave old Jack. He'll never get up again." The witch laughed and sang through the funeral. Betsy, too, suffered greatly. The witch tormented her until she broke off her engagement to a local boy. The entity claimed it would never allow Betsy to marry. And then, as suddenly as it began, the witch was gone. The Bell Witch's reign of terror faded after John's death. Some say the entity promised to return years later, though no one knows if it ever did. To this day, the Bell Witch remains one of the most famous ghost stories in American folklore. Skeptics call it hysteria, a blend of gossip and superstition. Believers swear it was real, that too many witnesses saw and heard things they couldn't explain. The Bell Witch Cave, near the old farm, is still a place people visit, claiming to feel strange presences or hear whispers in the dark. Okay, let's take a breath after that one. What makes the Bell Witch so unsettling isn't just the violence, though there was plenty of that, but the intelligence, the voice, the way it seemed to know people's secrets, mock them, play with them like toys. That makes it feel less like a mindless haunting and more like a personality. Someone you could talk to, but someone who hated you. It's one thing to believe in bumps in the night. It's another to believe that the bump can talk back, argue with you, even laugh while you bury your father. Whether you believe it or not, the Bell Witch is one of those stories that sticks. Because at the heart of it is a question. What if the people we wrong in life never really leave? Our first story took us to a Tennessee farm where a restless spirit whispered through the walls and brought down a family. For our next tale, we're traveling farther south, into the heart of Louisiana, where the humid air carries more than just the scent of magnolias. This is one of America's most haunted houses, a place where history, tragedy, and ghostly lore intertwine so deeply that visitors swear you can feel it before you even step inside. This is the story of the Myrtles Plantation. The Myrtles Plantation sits in St. Francisville, Louisiana, built in 1796 by General David Bradford. From the outside, it's picture perfect. Sweeping porches, moss-draped oak trees, and the kind of southern beauty you'd expect to see on a postcard. But appearances can be deceiving. For over 2 centuries, the Myrtles has carried a reputation as one of the most haunted houses in America. They say a dozen ghosts linger here. Some are tied to tragedy, some to betrayal, and some to the darker chapters of history that echo through its halls. The most famous ghost said to haunt the Myrtles is a woman named Chloe. The legend goes like this. Chloe was enslaved at the plantation in the early 1800s, working in the household of Clark and Sarah Woodruff. According to the tale, Chloe lived under constant fear of punishment. One day, she was caught eavesdropping on her master's conversations. As punishment, her ear was cut off. Afterward, she began wearing a green turban to hide the wound. Afraid for her safety and desperate to regain favor, Chloe hatched a plan. She baked a cake for the family and slipped poisonous oleander leaves into the batter. Some say she intended only to make them sick, so she could nurse them back to health and be seen as indispensable. But the plan went horribly wrong. Sarah Woodruff and 2 of her children ate the cake and died. When the truth came out, Chloe was dragged from the house. The other enslaved people, fearing retribution on everyone, hanged her from a tree. Her body was thrown into the Mississippi River. And that, they say, was only the beginning. Ever since, visitors and owners of the Myrtles Plantation claim to have seen Chloe, a woman in a green turban, wandering the halls, appearing in mirrors, lingering at the edges of photographs. One famous photo, taken in the 1990s, shows a shadowy figure standing between 2 buildings on the property. Experts who examined it said it hadn't been tampered with. Many believe it shows Chloe, still tied to the house where she lived and died. Some say she whispers in the dark. Others claim to hear her footsteps, soft but purposeful, moving through rooms when no one else is there. And in the dining room, where the poisoned cake was served, people report cold spots, the sudden feeling of dread, and the faint smell of something sweet lingering in the air. Another legend centers on one of the plantation's antique mirrors. According to superstition, when someone dies, mirrors in the house must be covered. Otherwise, the soul of the deceased could become trapped inside. When Sarah Woodruff and her children died, the story goes, the mirrors weren't properly covered. and ever since, their spirits have lingered within the glass. Visitors report seeing handprints pressed into the surface, as though someone inside were trying to get out. Others claim to see faces, pale, distorted, fleeting, staring back at them. The mirror has become one of the plantation's most famous features, a symbol of the house's layered tragedies. Chloe isn't the only ghost said to haunt the Myrtles. There's the figure of a young girl, often seen in a long dress, playing in the halls before vanishing. Some believe she's one of Sarah Woodruff's daughters, still lingering where she once lived. Guests have reported waking in the night to see a Confederate soldier standing at the foot of their bed, silent and watchful. Others speak of a piano that plays by itself, notes echoing through empty rooms late at night. Doors open and close without cause. Footsteps cross the floorboards above, even when the house is empty. It's as if the entire plantation is saturated with the memories of everyone who passed through it, and everyone who never left. Of course, not all historians agree with the legend of Chloe. Records don't prove her existence, and some researchers argue that the story was invented in later years to draw tourists. But even skeptics admit the Myrtles feels haunted. Too many independent accounts, too many eerie experiences, too many photographs with unexplained figures. Whether Chloe herself lived and died as the story says, or whether she became a symbol for the countless unnamed who suffered there, the plantation remains thick with ghostly lore. Today, the Myrtles Plantation operates as a historic inn. Guests can stay overnight, wander the grounds, and take ghost tours. Many leave with stories of their own. Footsteps in empty corridors, whispers in the dark, bed sheets tugged while they slept. Some check out early, too unsettled to stay. And then there are the brave ones, who walk up to the mirror and stare, waiting to see if something stares back. The Myrtles Plantation is one of those places where history and legend blur so completely that you can't separate them. Maybe Chloe was real, maybe she wasn't. But the story carries a truth either way, about betrayal, desperation, and lives cut short. What unsettles me most isn't just the possibility of ghosts. It's the reminder of what happened there in life. The cruelty, the fear, the injustice. Maybe it makes sense that a place built on suffering would never truly rest. And yet, there's something almost comforting about how the story has endured. Chloe's voice, whether fact or folklore, hasn't been silenced. People still speak her name, still tell her story. Maybe that, in its own way, is a kind of justice. We've traveled to Tennessee to meet the Bell Witch, and to Louisiana to wander the haunted halls of the Myrtles Plantation. For our next story, we're heading west, to a mansion that defies reason. A house of staircases to nowhere, doors that open into walls, and hallways that twist like a maze. It's said this house was built to appease spirits, and to this day, it remains one of the strangest, most haunted places in America. This is the tale of the Winchester Mystery House. Our story begins not with a house, but with a fortune. In the mid-1800s, Oliver Winchester founded the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. His invention, the Winchester rifle, became one of the most famous firearms in American history. Known as the gun that won the West, it was used in wars, battles, and countless frontier skirmishes. That gun brought the Winchester family immense wealth, but it also brought something else: death. Thousands upon thousands of lives were ended with Winchester rifles. And for Sarah Winchester, Oliver's daughter-in-law, that legacy became a curse. Sarah married William Wirt Winchester, Oliver's son. Together, they had a child, a daughter named Annie. But tragedy struck quickly. Annie died as an infant from a rare disease. William, too, passed away young, leaving Sarah a widow with no husband, no child, and a staggering inheritance. She inherited not just the family fortune, but nearly 50% of the company itself. By today's standards, she was a billionaire. But her wealth came at a cost: guilt, grief, and the sense that her family's fortune was soaked in blood. Grief-stricken, Sarah sought answers. According to legend, she turned to a spiritualist medium, someone who claimed to communicate with the dead. The medium told her that her family was cursed, that the spirits of every soul ever killed by a Winchester rifle were restless, vengeful, and would haunt her for the rest of her life. The only way to appease them, the medium said, was to move west, buy land, and build a house. But not just any house, a house that never ended. As long as construction continued, as long as hammers rang and saws cut, the spirits would be satisfied. If she ever stopped building, the medium warned, the spirits would claim her life. Sarah listened, and she obeyed. In 1884, Sarah Winchester purchased an unfinished farmhouse in San Jose, California. And then she began to build. For the next 38 years, until her death in 1922, construction never stopped. Day and night, crews of carpenters, masons and labourers worked under her orders. Money was no obstacle. Sarah's inheritance could pay for endless lumber, endless nails, endless glass. The result was a house like no other. Staircases that led straight into ceilings, doors that opened to brick walls, windows that looked into other rooms instead of outside, hallways that twisted and looped, entire wings built, sealed off, and abandoned. By the time Sarah died, the Winchester Mystery House had over 160 rooms, 40 bedrooms, 2 ballrooms, 40 staircases, some leading nowhere, over 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 47 fireplaces, 13 bathrooms, and a basement full of secrets. And yet, parts of the house still feel unfinished, as if the workers simply dropped their tools and walked away. Why build a house like this? Some say Sarah was simply eccentric, grieving, and lost in her wealth. But others believe she was following the medium's warning, that the endless construction was meant to confuse and trap the spirits haunting her. The stairs to nowhere, the doors into walls, these weren't mistakes. They were meant to lead spirits astray, to keep them wandering, never finding her. It's said Sarah would sleep in a different room every night, never the same one twice, to prevent the spirits from tracking her down. The number 13 also appears throughout the house. 13 windows in some rooms, 13 panes in the glass, 13 hooks in closets. To Sarah, this number had protective power. Visitors and workers alike have reported strange phenomena in the Winchester Mystery House. Footsteps echoing in empty halls, doors opening and closing by themselves, cold spots in rooms that should be warm, the sound of hammering, even though construction ended a century ago. Some say they've seen Sarah herself, a small woman in black, walking through the halls, inspecting the work, forever the mistress of a house that refuses to rest. Others report the spirits of workers, carrying tools, vanishing as quickly as they appear. Security guards who patrol at night tell stories of lights flickering on and off, voices whispering in the dark, and shadowy figures caught out of the corner of the eye. In 1906, a massive earthquake struck San Francisco and the surrounding area. The Winchester house was badly damaged. Parts of it collapsed, and Sarah herself was trapped in a room for hours until workers freed her. Afterward, she ordered much of the damaged wings sealed off, leaving staircases and doors that literally lead to nowhere. To this day, those sealed rooms remain, preserved like a time capsule from the early 1900s. Skeptics argue that Sarah was simply eccentric, traumatized by grief, and using construction as a way to cope. The endless building, they say, was less about spirits and more about distraction. But believers point to the consistency of the legends, the sheer strangeness of the house, and the countless ghostly encounters. Even now, the Winchester Mystery House operates as a tourist attraction, drawing thousands of visitors a year. People wander its halls, marvel at its bizarre design, and often leave with stories of their own. A shadow caught in a mirror, a voice in an empty stairwell, a tug on the back of a shirt when no one is behind them. It's less a house and more a labyrinth of grief and fear. The Winchester Mystery House is haunting not just because of the ghosts people claim to see, but because of the psychology behind it. Think about it. A woman so consumed by guilt and grief that she spends nearly 4 decades building a house she never finished. Every brick, every nail, every twist of the staircase was like a prayer or maybe an apology. And the result is a place that feels alive. Not just with ghosts, but with sorrow. Every hallway is a maze of grief. Every doorway into a wall is a reminder that some wounds never close. In Minecraft terms, imagine building a house that never ends, always adding new rooms, new staircases, new windows, until it stops being a home and becomes a prison. That's what Sarah Winchester left behind, not just for herself, but for every visitor who walks those halls today. We've journeyed through Tennessee's farmland to meet the Bell Witch, wandered the haunted halls of the Myrtles Plantation, and got lost in the endless rooms of the Winchester Mystery House. Now we cross the ocean to a fortress of stone that has stood for nearly 1,000 years, a place soaked in blood, secrets, and shadows, a place where kings ruled, queens wept, and prisoners met their end. And according to legend, many of them never left. This is the Tower of London. The Tower of London was founded in the 11th century by William the Conqueror. Built as both a fortress and a symbol of Norman power, it has loomed over the River Thames for nearly a millennium. Throughout its history, it has served many roles: a royal palace, an armory, a treasury, a prison, and even a zoo. But it's the bloodier chapters, the imprisonments, the betrayals, the executions, that gave the tower its haunted reputation. Stone holds memory, and the tower's stones have soaked up more than most. One of the most enduring ghost stories from the tower is that of the princes. In 1483, after the death of King Edward IV, his two sons, Edward V, just 12 years old, and his younger brother Richard, aged 9, were brought to the tower by their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. The tower was still used as royal lodging at the time, so their stay didn't seem unusual. But then, the boys vanished. Richard declared himself King Richard III. The princes were never seen again. Rumours swirled that they had been murdered, smothered in their sleep, buried in secret. Centuries later, bones were found hidden beneath a staircase, believed by many to be the remains of the princes. And yet, the story doesn't end there. Guards and visitors have reported seeing two small boys wandering the tower, dressed in night clothes, holding hands. Their faces are pale, their expressions lost. Witnesses say the boys appear together, silently, before fading into the walls. Some describe hearing soft crying in the night, echoing through the stone corridors. The princes, it seems, are still searching for the justice they never received. Perhaps the most famous ghost said to haunt the tower is Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII. Anne was intelligent, ambitious, and bold, qualities that helped her capture the king's heart, but also sealed her fate. Henry divorced his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and broke with the Catholic Church to marry Anne. But when she failed to produce a male heir, Henry turned against her. Accused of adultery, treason, and even witchcraft, Anne was imprisoned in the tower. On May 19, 1536, she was executed on Tower Green. Witnesses say her ghost still roams the tower. She's been seen near the site of her execution, her head tucked beneath her arm. Others claim to see her in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, where she is buried. Once, guards reported seeing her ghostly procession, a spectral funeral with mourners in Tudor dress, silently entering the chapel. For many, Anne represents the tragedy of the tower: beauty, power, and life cut short by betrayal. Another spectre often reported is known only as the White Lady. She is said to appear in the White Tower, drifting through the halls in a flowing gown. Her face is often obscured, her presence accompanied by the strong scent of perfume, so strong that guards have been known to cough and choke on it. Visitors describe a sudden feeling of dread, as though icy fingers brush against their skin. Some even claim to feel a tap on the shoulder, only to turn and find no one there. The White Lady's identity is unknown. Some believe she may be a noble woman executed in the tower, Others that she is simply a symbol of all the nameless lives lost within its walls. Lady Jane Grey is another tragic figure tied to the tower. At just 16 years old, Jane was placed on the throne of England after the death of Edward VI, but her reign lasted only 9 days before she was overthrown by Mary Tudor. Imprisoned in the Tower with her husband, Jane was executed on February 12, 1554. Witnesses described her as calm and composed, reciting prayers as she walked to the scaffold. Her ghost has been seen wandering the battlements, especially on the anniversary of her death. A pale girl in Tudor dress, her eyes sad but resolute. Some say she appears at dawn, as if replaying her final walk to execution. The Tower was the stage for countless executions, many of them high profile. Thomas More, the statesman who refused to acknowledge Henry VIII as head of the Church of England, was executed here in 1535. His ghost is said to wander the tower, still speaking softly of conscience and faith. Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, suffered one of the most brutal deaths in Tower history. At 67 years old, she was sentenced to die for treason. But when she reached the scaffold, she refused to kneel, declaring her innocence. The executioner, inexperienced and unsteady, struck her again and again, chasing her around the scaffold before finally killing her. Her screams are said to echo through Tower Green on quiet nights. No story of the tower would be complete without mentioning the ravens. For centuries, ravens have lived at the tower, and legend holds that if they ever leave, the kingdom will fall. To this day, ravens are kept at the tower, cared for by the Raven Master. Their wings are clipped to ensure they stay, but their presence still adds to the tower's eerie atmosphere. Some say the ravens themselves are guardians of the dead, that they carry the spirits of those executed within the tower, their black wings echoing with the voices of the lost. Modern guards, known as yeoman warders or beefeaters, also tell tales of ghostly encounters. One guard reported seeing a strange mist form in the salt tower, slowly taking the shape of a man before vanishing. Another described being pushed by unseen hands while on night patrol. Perhaps the most chilling story came from a guard who entered the Martin Tower and was overwhelmed by the scent of roses, only to see a woman in Tudor dress standing before him. As he reached for her, she vanished. Later, he learned the room had once held prisoners awaiting execution, and the scent of roses had long been associated with Anne Boleyn. What makes the Tower of London so haunted isn't just the number of ghosts reported, it's the sheer weight of history. This fortress has seen betrayals, usurpations, and the fall of dynasties. It has been a place of refuge and of terror. Thousands of lives ended within its walls, some quietly in cells, others publicly on the scaffold. Every stone is marked by human suffering, and perhaps that's why the tower is still so alive with whispers, shadows, and figures that refuse to fade. The Tower of London is one of those places where history and ghost stories can't be separated. It's not just about seeing a figure in the dark. It's about standing in a place where you know tragedy happened, where you know people lived and died in fear. Whether the spirits are real or not, the feeling is undeniable. The weight of centuries presses down. Every creak of stone, every flap of a raven's wing feels like a reminder of all that's been lost. And maybe that's why the ghosts linger, because the tower itself is their monument. So far, we've stayed mostly in the West: American farms, plantations, Californian mansions, English fortresses. But hauntings aren't just Western tales. Ghost stories exist everywhere, in every culture, often carrying their own flavor, their own fears, their own traditions. For our next story, we travel to Japan, a land where spirits, known as eerie, are woven deeply into folklore. Pale women in white robes, long black hair hanging over their faces, lingering where lives ended unjustly. Among Japan's most famous ghost stories is that of Okiku, a young servant, betrayed and murdered, whose voice still echoes from the depths of a well. This is the story of Okiku's well. To understand Okiku's story, we begin with a castle. Himeji Castle in Hyogo Prefecture is one of Japan's most breathtaking landmarks. Rising above the city, its white walls and sweeping roofs resemble the wings of a great bird. It's sometimes called the White Heron Castle. But beneath its beauty lies centuries of war, intrigue, and blood. Built originally in the 14th century and expanded in the 16th, it became a fortress of power during Japan's feudal era. Within its grounds lies a simple stone well. Tourists pass by it every day, pausing to peer into the depths. And if you ask the guides, they'll tell you, this is Okiku's well, the place where one of Japan's most enduring spirits is said to dwell. Okiku was a servant, a young woman working in the household of a powerful samurai. In most versions of the story, her master was a man named Aoyama Tesan, though some retellings shift the names and families. What never changes is the cruelty that defined her fate. Aoyama possessed 10 valuable plates, fine porcelain, considered treasures. These plates weren't just dishes, they were symbols of wealth and prestige. According to legend, Aoyama became infatuated with Okiku. He wanted her as his mistress, but Okiku, loyal and virtuous, refused him. Again and again, she rejected his advances. Finally, Aoyama hatched a plan. He hid one of the plates and accused Okiku of losing it. To misplace even a single plate was punishable by death. He confronted her. "Where is the 10th plate?" Okiku, terrified, counted them again and again. 1, 2, 3, up to 9. But the 10th was missing. No matter how many times she checked, the plate was gone. Aoyama told her he would spare her life if she agreed to be his lover. But still, Okiku refused. And so, he had her beaten, bound, and thrown into the castle well. She drowned in its dark waters, betrayed and broken. After her death, the haunting began. At night, a voice rose from the well. Okiku's voice, soft, mournful, counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then a terrible wail. The sound of grief, of fury, of despair. Over and over, night after night, she counted the plates, always stopping at 9, always ending in anguish. The household was shaken. Servants whispered of seeing her pale figure rising from the well, dripping with water, hair hanging in her face. A eerie, restless, bound by injustice, doomed to repeat her sorrow. Okiku's counting became legendary. Locals said her voice carried through the castle grounds, echoing into the night. Superstition grew around the number 9. To this day, some avoid it because it's pronounced ku in Japanese, which is also a word for suffering. The connection to Okiku's endless count only deepened that unease. And so her story spread. First as whispered legend, then as written folktale, then as a staple of Japanese ghost lore. As with many ghost stories, there are variations. In some tellings, Aoyama himself is driven mad by Okiku's spirit. Her nightly counting, her wails, shatter his sanity. He begs for forgiveness, but none comes. In others, a Buddhist priest intervenes. He waits by the well until Okiku's voice reaches 9. Then, before she can wail, he calls out 10. Hearing the missing number, Okiku's spirit is finally released. At last, she can rest. But whether freed or still bound, her story endures. And her presence, they say, lingers at the well in Himeji. Okiku's tale became one of Japan's most famous kaidan, ghost stories. It was retold in plays, adapted into the traditional puppet theater of bunraku, and later into kabuki. In these performances, Okiku's suffering was dramatized. Her ghost portrayed with the iconic image of long black hair, white burial robes, and pale skin. That image has echoed through Japanese horror ever since. You've probably seen it in films like The Ring or Ju-On, The Grudge, where vengeful spirits with hair covering their faces became symbols of fear. All of that traces back, in part, to Okiku. Her story isn't just folklore, it's cultural DNA. At Himeji Castle, Okiku's well is still there. Tourists peer into its dark depths, some swearing they feel a chill, as though unseen eyes are staring back. Guides tell the story. Visitors sometimes leave offerings, coins, flowers, prayers for Okiku's restless soul. And even now, some claim to hear faint whispers, a woman's voice counting softly, always stopping at 9. Beyond the ghostly legend, Okiku's story holds deeper meaning. She represents injustice, the powerless crushed by the powerful, a servant with no voice, accused falsely, punished cruelly. Her ghost's endless counting is a reminder that wrongs, once done, don't simply vanish. They echo. They demand to be remembered. She also embodies resilience. Even in death, she refused to yield to her master's will. She became something greater than a victim, a symbol. And maybe that's why her story has lasted for centuries. Because every society, every age has its Okikus, the silenced, the wronged, the unheard. Okiku's well is chilling not just because of the ghost, but because of the injustice. It's one thing to fear shadows in the night. It's another to realize that the real horror was human cruelty. The ghost, in a way, isn't the scariest part. The scariest part is imagining Okiku's final moments. The helplessness, the betrayal, the refusal to surrender, even as she was cast into the dark. Her spirit's endless counting is haunting, yes, but it's also sad. A grief so deep, it loops forever. And that's where we'll end our journey through the shadows tonight. We've walked with the Bell Witch in Tennessee, whose voice mocked and cursed from the darkness of a farmhouse. We wandered through the Myrtles Plantation, where Chloe's spirit lingers in mirrors and photographs. We got lost in the endless staircases of the Winchester Mystery House, where sorrow built a labyrinth that never found its end. We stood among the stone walls of the Tower of London, listening for the cries of princes, queens, and prisoners whose lives were cut short. And we peered into the depths of Okiku's well, where a young woman's voice still counts, forever searching for what was taken from her. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, these stories remind us of something deeper, that history holds on to memory, and that the past has a way of echoing into the present. Maybe the real hauntings aren't just the spirits we fear, but the injustices, the grief, and the tragedies that never found closure. Thank you for spending this time here at Spiderfish. Whether you're letting these stories play while you mine in Minecraft, winding down before sleep, or just needing a companionable voice in the background, I'm glad you chose to be here. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, don't forget to like the video, share your favorite haunting in the comments, and subscribe for more long-form storytelling every week. Until next time, rest easy, stay curious, and remember, even in the quietest places, sometimes the past is still whispering. Good night, everyone.